The silver ship landed in the middle of what humans called a parking lot. Dr. Veltar stepped out first, his crystal body catching the sunlight and throwing rainbow patterns across the concrete. Behind him came 3 other aliens, each from different worlds across the galaxy. They all wore the same worried expression. "Remember," Veltar said to his team, "these are Death World creatures. Their planet is rated Class Twind. That means maximum danger. These humans have survived ice ages, plagues, and natural disasters that would wipe out entire civilizations." Zixka, the insect-like being from Hive World 7, clicked her mandibles nervously. The reports say they have wars for fun. They created something called sports, where they hit each other with sticks. "And they eat poison plants," added Thurok, the green-skinned amphibian, "for pleasure. The data files show they actually seek out painful food." The 4th team member, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Bloop, pulsed blue with anxiety. Their entertainment industry is based on simulated violence and terror. What kind of species enjoys fear? Veltar checked his equipment one more time. As the galaxy's leading expert on fear responses, he had tested over 2,000 different species. Every single one had predictable terror triggers. Fall from height, universal panic. Predator chase, instant flight response. Existential dread, complete mental breakdown within minutes. But humans were different. The preliminary reports were strange. Humans seemed to laugh at things that made other species faint. They had something called roller coasters that simulated falling to death, and they waited in lines to experience it. They had horror movies that showed terrible things happening, and they watched while eating snacks. "Sir," Zixka pointed toward a building with her pointed arm. "The humans are gathering." Veltar looked where she pointed. About 30 humans stood outside what their translator called a community center. They were talking and laughing. Some held drinks. A few had small humans with them, offspring according to the files. The children were running around making loud noises, completely unafraid. "They look so normal," Thurok whispered, and they did. The humans came in different sizes and colors, but they all looked soft. No claws, no armor plating, no obvious weapons. Their skin looked thin and easily damaged. Their teeth were small and mostly flat. If Veltar hadn't read the files, he would have thought they were harmless herbivores. "Remember," he told his team again, "these creatures survived on a planet where the weather can kill you. The animals hunt in packs and diseases spread through the air. They are the most dangerous apex predators the galaxy has ever seen. Do not let their appearance fool you." A female human approached their group. She had gray hair and walked slowly, using a stick. Her face was wrinkled with age. To Veltar, she looked like the most harmless creature he had ever seen. "Hello there," she called out, waving her hand. "You must be the space folks. I'm Agnes Thompson. Welcome to Earth." The translation device worked perfectly, but Veltar still couldn't believe what he was hearing. This aged human was greeting them like old friends. "We are here for the psychological assessment," Veltar said carefully. "You understand this is mandatory for joining the Galactic Council?" Agnes nodded happily. "Oh yes, dear. We're all very excited. My grandson Tommy wanted to come, but he had school. He made me promise to ask if you could come back next weekend. He wants to show you his bug collection." Bug collection. The elderly human's offspring collected other creatures for display. Veltar made a note in his files. "This will involve fear response testing," he explained. "We will subject you to scenarios designed to trigger terror responses. Many species find the experience unpleasant." "Oh, how wonderful." Agnes clapped her hands together. "Will it be like those haunted houses at Halloween? My late husband Harold loved those. He used to say the scarier the better." Veltar's crystal body darkened with confusion. "You enjoy fear?" "Well, not all of us," Agnes said thoughtfully. "But most folks appreciate a good scare now and then. It gets the blood pumping, makes you feel alive." Behind Veltar, Bloop's entire body turned pale yellow, which meant extreme distress in his species. Agnes led them into the building. Inside, more humans waited. They were sitting in chairs arranged in a circle like they were having a party. Someone had brought cookies. The smell of something sweet filled the air. "Everyone," Agnes announced, "these are our visitors from space." The humans turned to look at them. Instead of the fearful respect Veltar expected from apex predators, he saw curiosity and friendliness. Several humans waved. One called out, "Welcome to Earth." Another asked, "What's it like traveling between stars?" Veltar set up his equipment in the center of the room. The fear response machine was the size of a small vehicle. It contained holographic projectors, sound generators, chemical dispersers, and psychic amplifiers. The device could create any terrifying scenario and make it seem completely real. "How does it work?" asked a young human with bright yellow hair. "The machine reads your deepest fears and makes them real," Veltar explained. "It accesses your unconscious mind and finds what terrifies you most. Like a nightmare, but when you're awake," the human asked, leaning closer to examine the machine. "Much worse than any dream," Zixka said. "It creates pure terror." The yellow-haired human grinned. "Cool, can I go first?" Veltar looked at his team. In 50,000 years of galactic civilization, no one had ever volunteered to go first. Usually they had to drag subjects into the testing chamber. "You want to experience fear?" he asked. "Sure. I love scary stuff. I went skydiving last month, and next week I'm going bungee jumping. My friends say I'm crazy, but I think it's fun." The human had jumped out of aircraft for entertainment. Veltar made another note. "Very well," he said. "Please stand in the center circle." The human walked over casually, still smiling. Around the room, the other humans watched with interest instead of concern. No one tried to stop their companion. No one looked worried. Veltar activated the machine. First, he would try the universal fears, the ones that worked on every species they had ever tested. The room filled with light, and suddenly the human was standing on the edge of a cliff. Below her stretched an endless drop into darkness. Wind howled around her. Rocks crumbled under her feet. The human looked around with interest. "Wow, this is really realistic. The graphics are amazing." She leaned forward to look down into the abyss. In any other species, this would trigger instant panic. The fear of falling was programmed into every evolved creature in the galaxy. The human just whistled appreciatively. "That's a long way down. Good thing I'm not afraid of heights." Veltar increased the intensity. The cliff began to collapse. Chunks of rock fell past the human into the void. She had seconds before the entire ledge would crumble away. The human stepped back from the edge and brushed dust off her clothes. "This is like that movie with the mountain climbers." "What was it called?" "Oh, right, Cliffhanger. Great special effects in that one, too." The scenario ended. The human walked back to her chair looking pleased. "That was fun. Who's next?" Around the room, several other humans raised their hands. Veltar stared at his readings. The machine showed the human had experienced the cliff scenario, but her fear levels had actually decreased during the test. That was impossible. Fear responses were supposed to increase when facing mortal danger. "Next volunteer," he called out, hoping for better results. A large human male stepped forward. According to the identification he provided, his name was Jack Rodriguez. His file mentioned something called military service, which seemed to involve organized combat. "Marine Corps, retired," Jack said, standing straight. 20 years of service. "Ready when you are, Doc." Veltar decided to try predator scenarios. Every creature feared being hunted by something larger and more dangerous. He activated the machine again. Jack found himself in a dark jungle. Leaves dripped with moisture. Strange sounds echoed through the trees. Then the predator appeared, a massive alien creature with razor claws and glowing red eyes. It moved like liquid shadow, hunting him through the undergrowth. Jack crouched behind a fallen log and watched the creature pass by. Instead of running or hiding, he studied its movement patterns. "Interesting hunting style," he said quietly, "but it's making too much noise. Real predators are quieter, and it's not checking the trees for threats from above." Poor tactical awareness. The alien monster caught his scent and charged directly at him, roaring with a sound that had made seasoned warriors faint on other worlds. Jack stood up and faced it calmly. "The roar gives away its position. That's a rookie mistake. In real combat, you never announce your attack." He paused, thinking, though it might be trying to scare prey into running, fear makes targets predictable. The creature's claws passed right through Jack's body. The hologram couldn't actually hurt him, but the psychological impact should have been devastating. "Nice special effects," Jack said, walking through the dissipating monster. "Reminds me of that movie, Predator. Arnold Schwarzenegger classic. Have you seen it?" Veltar ended the scenario quickly. His instruments showed Jack's heart rate had barely increased. If anything, the human seemed more relaxed than when he started. The next volunteer was Sarah Chen, who identified herself as a teacher of small humans. Veltar decided to try isolation horror, the fear of being alone in endless darkness. Sarah appeared in an empty void. No light, no sound, no sensations except the feeling of floating in nothingness. Most beings broke down within minutes when faced with complete sensory deprivation. "Oh, this is peaceful," Sarah said, floating in the dark. "It's like meditation. Very quiet. I should try this at home after dealing with 30 kindergartners all day." She began humming a soft tune. The melody echoed strangely in the void, but instead of being frightened by the distorted sound, Sarah seemed to enjoy the acoustic effect. "The echo patterns are interesting," she mused. "I wonder if this is how sound travels in space. My students would love to learn about this." Veltar added threatening whispers to the void, voices, speaking of doom and despair in languages that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to primal fears. "Oh, are those other languages?" Sarah asked with interest. "They sound beautiful even if I can't understand them. Do you have translation guides? I'd love to learn some basic phrases to make future visitors feel welcome." Behind Veltar, Thurok was making distressed croaking sounds. The amphibian's skin had turned a sickly gray color. "Sir," Zixka whispered, "these readings can't be correct. The humans should be experiencing terror, not curiosity." Veltar ended Sarah's test and called for the next volunteer. A teenage human named Ashley Williams stepped forward. She was young, which meant her fear responses should be even stronger and less controlled. "Is this going to be like a horror movie?" Ashley asked excitedly. "I love horror movies. My favorites are the really scary ones that make other people scream." Veltar created a scenario filled with the undead, rotting corpses that shambled toward her with reaching hands and empty eye sockets. Zombie scenarios triggered deep evolutionary fears about disease and death. Ashley found herself surrounded by dozens of walking corpses. They moaned and reached for her with decaying fingers. Their rotting smell filled the air. "Oh, these are classic zombies." Ashley pulled out a device, her communication tablet, and began recording. "The makeup is incredible. How do you make the flesh look so realistically decomposed?" She walked closer to examine one of the zombies. "The detail work is amazing. Look at how the skin peels back from the bones. And the eye effects. Brilliant." The zombie grabbed for her. Ashley stepped aside easily and continued her examination. "Wait, are these the fast zombies or the slow ones?" "These seem pretty slow." "That's good. Fast zombies are less realistic. Real corpses wouldn't have working muscles for rapid movement." She turned to face where she thought the observers might be. "Can you make them do the thriller dance?" "That would be hilarious." Veltar increased the number of zombies. Soon Ashley was surrounded by hundreds of the creatures, all pressing closer. The scenario should have been overwhelming. "This is like that zombie walk they do in the city every year." Ashley laughed, pulling out her tablet to take pictures. "My friends are going to be so jealous. Can I get some selfies with them?" She began posing with the zombies, making faces at her camera. When one zombie got too close, she simply pushed it away like it was bothering her while she tried to get the perfect shot. "The lighting in here is really good for photos," she said, adjusting her angle. "Very atmospheric." Veltar shut down the scenario in frustration. Ashley walked back to her seat, already posting her photos to something called social media. "That was awesome," she announced to the room. "Way better than the haunted house at the mall." Agnes raised her hand. "Can I try the zombie one too? I love zombie movies, though I prefer the ones with romance. Zombies need love too." Veltar looked at his team. They were all showing signs of extreme stress. Bloop had turned completely transparent, which meant panic in his species. Zixka was clicking her mandibles so fast it sounded like rainfall. Thurok had partially retreated into his protective shell. "Perhaps we should try different scenarios," Zixka suggested weakly. "Yes," Veltar agreed. "We'll use the cultural fear database. Every species has specific terrors based on their evolutionary history." He accessed the human cultural files. Humans were afraid of many things according to their own entertainment. Ghosts, serial killers, giant spiders, clowns, and something called public speaking. "Who wants to try next?" Veltar asked. Every human in the room raised their hand. Veltar retreated to his ship with his team for an emergency meeting. The testing had gone on for 3 hours and every single scenario had failed. Humans had faced giant spiders, serial killers, ghosts, and even public speaking scenarios. They responded with fascination, critique, or mild amusement. "This is impossible," Zixka said, her insect body trembling. "The readings show they experience the fear stimulus, but then they analyze it instead of responding properly." One of them started giving acting advice to the holographic murderer, Thurrock croaked. She said his technique was too over the top, and suggested he watch more realistic crime documentaries. Bloop pulsed a deep purple, the color of existential crisis. The elderly female brought knitting needles and worked on clothing, while surrounded by venomous spiders. She said they reminded her of her garden back home. Veltar checked the Galactic Fear Response database. In 50,000 years of testing, they had never encountered a species that treated terror scenarios as entertainment. Every other civilization had predictable breaking points. We have one option left, he said finally. The existential dread matrix. His team went silent. The matrix was their ultimate weapon, used only in the most extreme cases. It forced subjects to confront the heat death of the universe, the meaninglessness of existence and their own cosmic insignificance. The device had driven entire warrior species to surrender rather than face it again. Sir, Zixka whispered, the Matrix has never failed, but it's also never been used on Death World creatures. We have our orders, Veltar said. The Galactic Council requires a complete fear assessment. If these humans are truly fearless, we need to know. They returned to the community center. The humans had somehow acquired more food during their absence. Someone had brought pizza, and the smell of cooked grain and fermented dairy products filled the air. The humans were eating while discussing the tests. The zombie effects were great, Ashley was saying, but I think the spider scenario needed work. Real giant spiders would move differently. I liked the public speaking one, said a man named Miguel, though having everyone in the audience turn into skeletons was a bit much. Real public speaking is scary enough without supernatural elements. Agnes looked up from her knitting. Are you ready for more tests, dear? She asked Veltar. We're having such a good time. Veltar set up the existential dread matrix. This device was larger and more complex than the fear machine. It didn't just create scenarios. It forced minds to truly comprehend concepts that broke most consciousness. This final test is different, he announced. It doesn't show you frightening images. Instead, it makes you understand certain truths about existence that most beings cannot handle. Philosophical horror? Miguel asked with interest. Like cosmic nihilism? I studied that in college. Fascinating stuff. You will experience the heat death of the universe, Veltar explained. You will feel the weight of cosmic time, the certainty that everything you know will end, and the ultimate meaninglessness of all actions in the face of entropy. Oh, like existentialism, said a woman named Janet. I teach philosophy at the local college. This should be interesting from an academic perspective. Veltar activated the matrix. The entire room disappeared, replaced by the vast emptiness of space. Stars flickered and died one by one. Galaxies drifted apart as the universe expanded into cold darkness. The humans felt themselves existing across billions of years, watching everything they had ever known or loved fade into nothing. Most beings screamed at this point. Some went catatonic. A few species had evolved mental defenses that simply shut down their consciousness rather than face this truth. The humans watched with fascination. Wow, Miguel said, floating in the cosmic void as stars died around him. This really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? The scale is incredible, Janet added. I mean, intellectually I knew about entropy, but experiencing it like this is completely different. This would be an amazing teaching tool for my students. Agnes was still knitting somehow. It's peaceful in a way. Like Harold always said, everything ends, so you might as well enjoy the time you have. Veltar increased the intensity. The humans experienced not just the death of stars, but the decay of matter itself. Protons dissolved. The very fabric of reality unraveled. They felt themselves witnessing the absolute end of everything, where not even the possibility of existence remained. This is what happens after the heat death? Sarah asked, still maintaining her curious teacher voice. I always wondered about that. Do the fundamental forces break down too, or just matter? The mathematical implications are staggering, Janet said. If information itself ceases to exist, does that mean the universe never happened? It's like asking if a tree makes sound when it falls with no one to hear it, but taken to the ultimate extreme. Jack, the former Marine, was nodding thoughtfully. You know, this makes my worst deployment seem pretty manageable. When you put it in cosmic perspective, most problems are pretty small. Ashley was trying to take pictures of the universe ending. This is going straight on social media. None of my friends will believe this. Veltar shut down the matrix. The humans returned to the community center. looking remarkably calm for beings who had just experienced ultimate cosmic horror. "That was incredible," Miguel said. "Do you have any books about cosmology? I'd love to learn more about this stuff." "The visual effects were beautiful," Ashley added. "Like the best nature documentary ever made." Agnes had somehow finished several rows of knitting during the experience. "That was lovely, dear. Very relaxing. It reminded me of those planetarium shows Harold and I used to watch." Veltar stared at his readings. Not only had the humans survived the existential dread matrix, their stress levels had actually decreased. They were more relaxed now than when the test started. "How?" he asked, his crystal voice cracking with strain. "How do you face the end of everything and feel calm?" "Well," Sarah said thoughtfully, "it's not really scary when you think about it. I mean, it's not happening tomorrow. And even if it was, getting upset wouldn't change anything. Plus," Jack added, "humans have been dealing with the idea of death forever. We know everything ends. That's why we try to make the time we have matter." "And it was beautiful," Agnes said, looking up from her knitting. "All those stars, all that time. We're part of something so much bigger than ourselves." "That's not frightening, it's wonderful," Miguel nodded. "Exactly. Instead of making life meaningless, it makes every moment precious. If this is all temporary, then we should enjoy it while we can." Veltar looked around the room. The humans were already planning their next activities. Someone suggested ordering more pizza. Ashley was showing her photos to friends over video chat. Agnes was teaching Janet a new knitting pattern. They had faced the ultimate horror of existence and responded by becoming more social, more creative, more alive. "What do you fear?" Veltar asked desperately. "There must be something that terrifies you." The humans looked at each other thoughtfully. "Boring meetings," Jack said finally. "Running out of coffee," Miguel added. "Stepping on my cat in the dark," Sarah contributed. "Getting a bad haircut right before photo day," Ashley said. Agnes nodded seriously. "Having to throw away leftovers because they went bad. Such a waste." Veltar realized with growing horror that he hadn't found what humans feared most. He had taught humans what everyone else feared most, and now they were asking questions. The question started innocently enough. "How does the fear projection technology work?" Miguel asked, examining the matrix with obvious interest. "Is it some kind of neural interface, or does it manipulate local reality?" Veltar had answered similar questions from scientists across the galaxy. Usually he felt proud to explain his work, but something about Miguel's curiosity made him nervous. "It reads brainwave patterns and amplifies fear responses through quantum consciousness manipulation," he explained, carefully. "Fascinating," Janet said, taking notes. "So it essentially weaponizes psychology? What kind of range does it have?" "Weaponizes?" Veltar's crystal body darkened. "This is a scientific instrument for assessment purposes only." "Of course," Janet said quickly. "I just meant theoretically if someone wanted to use fear as a tool for control, this technology could do that." Before Veltar could answer, Sarah had another question. "What other species have you tested? Do they all respond the same way?" "Each species has unique fear patterns based on their evolutionary history," Zixka answered. "Predator species fear loss of dominance. Prey species fear pursuit. Hive minds fear isolation. So you have a complete psychological profile of every species in the galaxy?" Jack asked. His tone was casual, but Veltar noticed the former Marine was paying very close attention to the answer. "The Galactic Council requires complete fear assessments for all member species," Thurak said. "It helps maintain peace and understanding." "How considerate," Agnes said, looking up from her knitting. "It's always good to understand what makes people uncomfortable. That way you can avoid upsetting them accidentally." Something about the way she said it made Bloop pulse bright red with alarm. "Can I see some of the test footage?" Ashley asked. "For, artistic inspiration?" "I'm studying film production. The assessment files are classified," Veltar said firmly. "Oh, of course," Ashley said. "But hypothetically, if someone wanted to make a really effective horror movie for different alien species, this research would be super helpful, right?" The humans continued asking questions while they shared their pizza. Each question seemed innocent by itself, but together they painted a disturbing picture. The humans were systematically gathering intelligence about galactic civilization's psychological weaknesses. "Agnes," Sarah said, "didn't you mention you were organizing the neighborhood Halloween celebration this year?" "Oh yes, dear," Agnes replied, her needles clicking steadily. We're planning something special. 43 houses are participating this year, and we've been sharing ideas online with other communities around the world. What's Halloween? Zixka asked. Despite Veltar's warning look, the humans exchanged glances that somehow managed to be both innocent and terrifying. It's a holiday dedicated to fear, Miguel explained. We spend months preparing scary displays, then children go door to door collecting treats while being frightened by various horrors. You frighten your offspring for entertainment? Thurak croaked, his skin turning pale green. They love it, Jack said with a grin. The scarier the better. Last year, my neighbor built a haunted house in his garage. Kids came from 3 counties over to experience it. Some of them went through multiple times. We have contests, Ashley added. Best costume, scariest decoration, most creative horror scene. Entire neighborhoods compete to see who can create the most effective terror. It sounds like military psychological warfare training, Zixka whispered. Oh no, Sarah said cheerfully. It's much more sophisticated than that. Military training is about breaking people down. Halloween is about creating exactly the right amount of fear to be enjoyable. It's a much more complex challenge. Veltar felt his crystal structure vibrating with stress. You're saying your entire species practices psychological manipulation as a recreational activity? Well, when you put it that way, it sounds sinister, Agnes said. We prefer to think of it as fear appreciation, like wine tasting but for terror. Fear appreciation, Bloop repeated faintly. Oh yes, Agnes continued. Different people prefer different types of scares. Some like sudden surprise, others enjoy building dread. There are people who specialize in psychological horror, and others who focus on visual shock. It's quite an art form. We've been doing it for thousands of years, Miguel added. Every culture on Earth has traditions around controlled fear experiences. Ghost stories, scary dances, ritual scares during coming-of-age ceremonies. We've had a lot of practice. A lot of practice, Thurak repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Janet looked up from her notes. It's really quite remarkable from an anthropological perspective. Most species seem to develop fear responses purely for survival. Humans are unique in that we've turned fear into entertainment, education, and social bonding. Social bonding? Veltar asked weakly. Oh, absolutely, Sarah said. Shared fear experiences bring people together. Couples go to scary movies to hold hands during the frightening parts. Friends dare each other to try increasingly scary activities. Fear creates trust and intimacy. Plus, Jack added, it's excellent training. If you can stay calm while being chased by a guy with a chainsaw, even if you know it's fake, you're better prepared for real emergencies. Guy with a chainsaw? Zixka's mandibles clicked rapidly. It's a power tool, Ashley explained helpfully, used for cutting trees, but in horror contexts it makes a great scary sound effect. Very loud and threatening. Agnes nodded approvingly. Harold always said the chainsaw was a classic. Simple, effective, time-tested. You can't go wrong with the classics. Veltar realized the humans had somehow taken control of the conversation. Instead of being tested, they were educating his team about human fear culture, and the more he learned, the more terrified he became. So, Miguel said, leaning back in his chair, this fear assessment technology of yours, it must be pretty valuable, right? I mean, if someone could reverse engineer it, they could create some amazing entertainment applications. It could revolutionize the horror industry. Ashley agreed. Imagine being able to customize scary experiences for different personality types. Or educational applications, Janet added. Controlled fear responses could be excellent for teaching stress management and emotional regulation. And team-building exercises, Jack said. Nothing brings a group together like surviving a shared scary experience. The therapeutic possibilities are endless, Sarah chimed in. Exposure therapy for phobias, confidence building, personal growth through controlled challenge. Agnes looked up from her knitting one more time. You boys should stay for Halloween. It's only 3 weeks away. You could see how we do things here on Earth. Stay? Veltar asked. Oh yes, Agnes said sweetly. I insist. Consider it part of the cultural exchange. After all, you've learned about our fear responses. Now we should learn about yours. The humans all smiled at the alien assessment team. They were the same friendly smiles they had worn all day, but now Veltar could see something else behind them. Curiosity, scientific interest, and the patient, predatory focus of creatures who had turned fear itself into an art form. Outside, the sun was setting. Soon it would be dark. 3 weeks later, Veltar stood in what the humans called Agnes Thompson's backyard, wondering how his life had gone so wrong. His team's ship remained mysteriously inoperable. Miguel had offered to help with repairs, but every time he fixed something, 2 new problems appeared. "It's just old technology," Miguel had explained cheerfully. "These older model hyperdrive systems are tricky. Good thing we have plenty of time to figure it out." Now Veltar understood they weren't stranded by accident. They were being detained by the friendliest, most polite kidnappers in galactic history. "Dr. Veltar," Agnes called from her back porch. "Come see what we've prepared for you." The backyard had been transformed. What had once been a simple garden was now a maze of horror that made Veltar's fear assessment equipment look like children's toys. Fake tombstones emerged from artificial fog. Skeleton hands reached up from freshly dug graves. Motion sensors triggered screaming sounds and sudden movements from hidden monsters. "Isn't it wonderful?" Agnes beamed with pride. The whole neighborhood worked together. Mrs. Peterson contributed the sound effects. She used to work in theater. The Johnson family built the graveyard scene, and little Tommy designed the haunted maze using some very advanced mathematics. Veltar looked at the maze. The paths curved in ways that seemed to violate geometry. Walls shifted when no one was looking directly at them. The whole structure felt bigger inside than it appeared from outside. "How did you build this?" he asked weakly. "Oh, we had some inspiration," Agnes said. "That holographic technology of yours gave us some wonderful ideas. We couldn't replicate it exactly, but we found some creative workarounds." Through the fog, Veltar could see other yards. Every house on the street had been converted into a different type of horror experience. One featured a carnival theme with twisted clowns and broken carousel music. Another had created a zombie apocalypse scene complete with burning cars and shambling figures. "The beauty of it," Jack explained, appearing beside them in what appeared to be authentic military gear, "is that each house targets different fear responses. We've got everything covered. Claustrophobia, heights, insects, social anxiety, body horror, existential dread. Something for everyone." "Body horror?" Zixka asked, her voice barely audible. "Oh, the Henderson family went all out," Sarah said, joining the group. She was dressed as something called a witch and carrying a smoking cauldron. "They created this amazing display about transformation and mutation. Very artistic. The special effects look so real you'd swear they were actually changing people into monsters. The rock made a sound like a dying fish. And the beautiful thing," Janet added, approaching with a clipboard, "is that we've been documenting everything. Response times, fear triggers, effectiveness ratings. We're building quite a database." "Database?" Veltar whispered. "For next year, of course," Agnes said. "We want to make sure we can provide appropriate scares for all our new alien friends. Word has gotten out about your visit, and we're expecting visitors from several other species next Halloween." "Other species?" "Oh yes," Miguel said, materializing from behind a fake tombstone. "We've been in contact with some of your colleagues. The ones who tested the Zephyrians seemed very interested in our methods, and apparently the Hive World 7 assessment team wants to study our group fear dynamics." Ashley bounded over, wearing an elaborate costume covered in fake blood. "And we've been uploading videos to the galactic internet. The response has been amazing. Apparently humans are becoming quite famous for our unique approach to psychological experiences." "You're sharing human fear techniques with the galaxy?" Veltar asked in horror. "Cultural exchange," Agnes said happily. "Though we've had to tone down some of our ideas. Apparently most species aren't ready for our advanced concepts yet." "Advanced concepts?" "Well," Sarah explained, "we mentioned some of our classic horror themes, like the idea that the real monster is humanity itself, or cosmic horror where the universe is fundamentally hostile to consciousness. And several civilizations' philosophical departments had complete breakdowns. Apparently," Jack added with a grin, "the concept of body horror, fear of your own physical form being altered or corrupted, is so alien to most species that just describing it causes existential crises. And don't get started on psychological horror," Janet said, making notes on her clipboard. "The idea of being afraid of your own mind, your own thoughts and perceptions, is completely foreign to most galactic species." Agnes nodded sagely. "They're not ready for the sophisticated scares yet. We'll have to start them with simpler fears and work up to the complex ones." "Simple fears," Bloop repeated, his entire body now a pale, frightened white. The first group of human children appeared at the edge of the yard. They were small, young humans dressed as various monsters and carrying bags for collecting treats. They saw the alien assessment team and waved cheerfully. "Trick or treat," they called out in unison. "Oh, wonderful." Agnes clapped her hands. "Children, these are our special guests from space. They're here to learn about Halloween." The small humans immediately surrounded the aliens, chattering excitedly about costumes and candy, and who had the best decorations this year. They showed no fear of the alien visitors. In fact, they seemed to think Veltar's crystal body and his team's unusual appearances were part of the Halloween experience. "Are you guys supposed to be aliens?" one small human asked. "That's so cool. The makeup looks totally real." "We are real aliens," Zixka said faintly. "Awesome." The child replied, "Do you want to come trick-or-treating with us? We know all the best houses." Before the aliens could answer, the children had surrounded them and begun leading them toward the street. Agnes followed, beaming with pride. "Isn't this wonderful?" she said. "The children are so excited to share our traditions with new friends." As they walked through the neighborhood, Veltar saw the full scope of what the humans had created. Every house was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. The decorations weren't just scary. They were scientifically designed to trigger specific fear responses while keeping the experience enjoyable rather than traumatic. More impressively, the humans had somehow learned to read alien body language. As they moved from house to house, Veltar noticed that each display seemed calibrated to push his team's buttons without crossing the line into actual panic. "How do you know exactly how much fear to apply?" he asked Agnes as they watched Thurok experience something called a haunted aquarium that featured underwater monsters. "Oh, that's the real skill," Agnes replied. "Any fool can terrify someone. The art is in creating just enough fear to be exciting without being harmful. It takes practice and observation and a deep understanding of psychology." "You've weaponized fear," Veltar said with growing realization. "Oh no, dear," Agnes corrected gently. "We've domesticated it. Fear used to control us, so we learned to control fear instead. Now it serves us rather than the other way around." As the evening progressed, Veltar watched human children as young as 5 years old navigate complex horror scenarios with laughter and delight. They evaluated scares with the critical eye of experts, rating performances and suggesting improvements. The zombie could use more shambling. One small human advised another house's decorator, and maybe some groaning sounds. But the torn clothes effect is really good. These tiny humans were already experts in psychological manipulation. They had been trained from birth to analyze, appreciate, and ultimately control fear. The final stop was the community center where the testing had begun. Inside, the humans had prepared what they called a finale experience. "This is our special treat for you," Miguel said, leading them inside. A collaborative effort from the whole neighborhood. The room had been converted into something that defied description. It combined elements from every fear the aliens had experienced, but somehow made them beautiful rather than terrifying. The existential void was there, but filled with warm light and gentle music. The predator scenarios had become an elegant dance. The zombie apocalypse had been transformed into a celebration of life overcoming death. "We realized," Sarah explained as they walked through the experience, "that you probably haven't had many positive fear experiences. So we wanted to show you what fear could be when it's not about survival, when it's about growth and joy and community." At the center of the room sat Agnes, still knitting, surrounded by representations of cosmic horror that had been somehow rendered comforting rather than threatening. She looked up as they approached. "Did you enjoy Halloween, dear?" she asked Veltar. Veltar looked around at the impossible beauty surrounding them. His team was no longer trembling with terror. They were experiencing something like wonder. The humans had taken everything that made beings afraid and turned it into art. "What are you?" he asked finally. Agnes smiled and went back to her knitting. "We're just humans, dear. We're the people who looked at a universe full of things that wanted to eat us, and decided to laugh instead of cry." She paused in her work and looked up at him with eyes that held the wisdom of a species that had turned terror into joy. "The question is," she said gently, "what are you going to tell the Galactic Council about us?"